Ready? Play.
Hello, everybody. I'm welcoming today David Sammel. I hope I'm saying your surname correctly, David.
You are indeed, yes.
Okay, there are more complicated names in the tennis world, both in the coaching and player department. David, of course, is Liam Broady's coach, among one or two other players as well. But before we get into that, David, I've got a question for you, and I'm going to go straight for it. Can you explain this picture for me? Can you see the picture I've got up on the screen?
Yes, I can, yeah. So that's Marcus Daniel, myself, and Demelina a few years ago. We went through a little period where every tournament we went to, we took a picture from on top with the logo of the tournament there. So this was the Australian Open. I think they made third round that year. So it was a pretty good tournament. But yeah, we just did it for fun. So I've got a few of those from a few tournaments.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's obviously your picture. You've got atop your Twitter page at Dave Sammel for those of you tuning in. There's a nice picture as well of you and Liam here, for example, in Bergamo that I'm just having a quick look at. What's this about? What's this picture all about at the end of October? This one here.
Yeah, so on a day off at the tournament, we went up to the old village, which had some really good restaurants. We had lunch there, and this was the view from the old village looking down on town. That's Liam, myself, and Liam's brother, Callum, who travels with us and helps out with a lot of admin for Liam.
Do you have any sympathies for Manchester City, bearing in mind Liam's
Zero.
Zero? What have you got a team?
Yeah, I'm a Man United fan.
Oh. This is I've written a book about United, so I guess you and Liam sort of jest with each other a bit about football.
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately, since I've been working with Liam, the power base has shifted completely. So I haven't had the bragging rights at all. He's too young for that.
Tell us about talking about your working relationship with Liam. How did that come about, and what happened basically?
Well, I've known Liam since he was about 4 or 5 years old. So I was the head coach at Matchpoint Tennis Centre, which was one of the first indoor centres in the country, in Bramhall in near Manchester. So, and he was from Stockport, and his dad was a member of Matchpoint and played tennis, and he used to bring the kids in, and he used to have to bribe Naomi and Emma to play, and Liam was starting with mini tennis over there. And then I went and moved to Leeds to run the academy, the LTA National Academy in Leeds, and I recruited Naomi into that academy when not many people believed in her, and then Liam used to sometimes come up, and I'd give him a couple of lessons here and there, but he was mostly traveling then with his dad. And then the next real interaction we had was in Winnipeg, in Canada, where he was there playing a $15,000 future, and I was there with Richard Gabb and Marcus Daniel, who you saw, and a couple of Scott Clayton Bath players. And we got talking, and one of the questions that I asked was why he was still playing futures when clearly with a few tweaks to his game, I believed he could survive at challenger level. So he asked me if I'd go on court with him there. We did a session. We talked about his tennis, and I had to leave after the first round there, and he went on to win the tournament. So when he came back, he asked me if if I'd work with him, and I said yes. He was with Mark Hilton with the LTA at that stage, so he asked if Mark could still stay involved, and I agreed to that, and we got started, and he won Wrexham straight after that, and another 15K, which he hadn't hit 10Ks before, but not 15s. And then I took him immediately onto the Challenger Tour, and he qualified for Napa Valley. And then very soon after that, made finals of Charlottesville, and actually, unfortunately, got to the last round of qualifying of the Australian Open in the January. So we'd only been working together, about 5 months at that stage. And he had already gone from 330 in the world to top 200, and lost to Mike Russell, who was in his last Grand Slam. And so it was a real shame because he had beaten Mike Russell a couple of months before in Knoxville Challenger, making the semifinals there, which was very disappointing for him. And then we actually split up in about April that year, and then 18 months later he came back, and we've been together ever since. So that was like 2016.
Okay, so it's been 6 years now in the second stint. When you first came across him, you mentioned there was a couple of tweaks to his game, and I'm particularly interested in what it's like being a coach at that level, if you like, the ITF level, a bit lower down the rankings. But what were the tweaks that you were particularly focused on with Liam?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing was for him to use his lefty forehand more and try to get some more fizz on the ball and actually curl the ball cross court more, take people out of court more. And then the second thing was taking the ball a lot earlier. Okay. So Liam used to, do a lot of road running. He's got very good legs and moves extremely well. But in my opinion, he was using his legs to save himself rather than as a weapon. And we worked a lot on taking the ball earlier, taking on second serves, which are philosophies that I've believed in all my coaching career. Sadly, in one way, Roger Federer in 2018, when he came out and won the Australian Open after the layoff, took the ball so early, and that kind of woke up the whole of the tennis world. McEnroe had obviously done it before that, but Federer doing it seemed to awaken the idea of taking the ball so early in everybody, and I feel like I've lost a slight bit of my competitive edge as a coach because it's now something that very good players are all doing. And I think that was one of the reasons why Liam cut through so quickly from like 330 to top 200 and got to about 150 because just by taking it earlier in that time in tennis and back in 2014, 15, not that many people were doing it.
How's it going right now with this particular period of the year, David? What happens between you and player? Let's look at Liam. We will be looking at your other protege in a minute, but just talking about you and Liam right now. Obviously, we've got Australia coming up in about the season in Australia kind of kicks off in about 4 weeks. What's the schedule like in terms of qualifying, etc., etc.?
Well, he's in off-season training now. And he's doing quite a lot of high altitude training, which is a machine that he's bought that allows him to, train wearing a mask, which mimics altitude and sleeping in an altitude tent, and training extremely hard. Also, he had an injury after, that forced him to pull out of the quarterfinals of Tel Aviv against Chilich. So he had a 5-week sort of block there. He had a 5-week block before Tel Aviv after the US Open. And now he's back on another training block. So I think physically he's going into next year the best he's ever been. Well, I won't even say I think, I know he is. And then we're also working on a couple of little things in the game, that little tweaks that I think the game is set now. He's playing very, very good tennis, and it's just getting a little better at everything he does to get that final bit of consistency that hopefully will rocket him into the top 100 in 2023. Which, if he'd got the points from Wimbledon and COVID hadn't have happened, I think he might, he probably would have achieved it already. In the COVID year, he was top 100, but people kept their points, so he didn't quite fall over the line then. So
I'm glad. Go on.
So yeah, so that's the aim, and yeah, I think he's going to be physically in really the best shape ever to launch into 2023. And then we start off in Canberra, the Challenger, into qualifying for Australian Open.
Okay, when's that? Is it end of December, is it?
Canberra starts on, I think, the 3rd of January, and then qualifying is the 9th of January.
Qualifying. So that's really, that's arguably one of the biggest weeks of the year.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's almost insanely quick. I think
it is.
Australian Open, I think, ought to be last week of January and first week of February, but I don't make the schedule.
Okay, indeed. Listen, you touched on Wimbledon, and I think we should definitely do that. Bearing in mind, is it fair to say the highlight of his career so far?
Yeah, I think. I think he would say, and I would say that the Olympics 3rd round was a highlight. I think playing Davis Cup was another highlight. But yes, certainly in terms of tournament play, this was obviously a big highlight. Having beaten Schwartzman on a big court as well, that's not easy to do.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, Schwartzman, I mean, obviously is was a top 10 player a couple of years ago, albeit that probably had a bit more reputation on clay than on grass. What is it like as a coach? I mean, the night before a match, are you guys talking about the opposite player? Are you working more on Liam's strengths, or do you have a sort of a lengthy talk about the opposition and their strengths and weaknesses?
I'd say the lengthy talk usually comes before the tournament. The night before, it's actually quite short. It's just the few little pointers as to the way he's going to play the person. Also, a big focus is to really, steal the mind to deliver what you can deliver as well. Because to play the right way in big matches, you have to be brave, and there would be no reason for people to have to be brave if there was no kind of fear there, because everybody is nervous and a little bit afraid going into big matches or any match, and you the preparation of the mind to really settle and be determined to put your game on the court in the right way is a big part of preparation. And you think, oh, well, that should just happen. It doesn't. You have to continually work at that. It's not automatic.
Yeah, right. So obviously we've had the season gone by. I mean, do you and Liam set out objectives for 2023? Do you look at facts and figures? Do you look at how last year went and look at every tournament and think about improving?
I mean, obviously you do that all through the year. And I'd say that at the end of the year, you kind of have a summary of how the year's gone. And then you do look to the key points that need to be improved for the following year. And, we had that chat last week. And, I think you have to keep creating the clarity of mind and the clarity of what you're practicing and stay on track, which can easily get bumped. You can easily get bumped off track by an odd match here and there that doesn't go the right way, and start to overthink the problem. And I think a big part of the coach is to say no. That's a bit of an anomaly, or and the other person either played extremely well or you missed a couple of opportunities. You need to stay on the path and not really tinker with the path, because if you keep tinkering with the path, you're not building in the same direction all the time.
What's it like coaching two players? Obviously, you've also got Marcus Daniel on board as well. Tell us about what it's like coaching two players, and also tell us a bit about Marcus.
Well, this 2022 has been very easy because Marcus got hurt after Australian Open and hasn't played the rest of the year. And I don't think he had a serious knee problem, and he won't play until probably March or April 2023. So 2022 was a lot easier. But I mean, I think at challenger and futures level, you could cope with 2, maybe even 3 singles players. At tour level, the only reason it could work is because Marcus is focused on doubles and Liam on the singles, and Marcus, tended to go deeper in tournaments in doubles. So if Liam as the singles player always had priority, but it's easier for the doubles players to organize practice around Liam's practice. And if Liam happened to lose, earlier, then I would just continue on with Marcus. So I think it's more of the doubles player's decision as to whether they are satisfied with the amount of time that you can put into them. But I mean, I've been with Marcus since like 2012. We know each other very well. He's a very good professional. He knows what he has to do. So the less hands-on doesn't bother him. He knows what he's got to do, and he's just happy to spend the time available that I have with him, which was mostly in the Grand Slams anyway, and some of the bigger 1000s.
Tell us about the player-coach dynamic. I think as tennis grows, obviously social media, television, I mean, we've got wall-to-wall coverage, including this channel, and things popping up all over the show. And in a way, we're all looking for different angles and different stories. The coaches are becoming more of a thing now. Tennis fans, maybe yesteryear, just used to watch Wimbledon a couple of weeks a year. That was it, particularly in the UK anyway. But now they're watching all the tournaments. They're getting into the Masters and perhaps even challengers and lower down. But also there's focus now on the coaches. We watch a match and, every 30 seconds, 60 seconds, end of every point, we're going to the box to see what's going on. So faces and names are becoming more prominent. We're also looking at relationships, etc., etc. What I think many people, especially me anyway, find interesting is this player-coach dynamic, because, David, who's the boss?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very strange sport where the boss is paid by the employee in a way. It's really strange, because I mean, the higher you get, the more collaborative the relationship is. But I think the more mature players don't necessarily think about the fact that they pay the coach as a reason to use it as leverage against listening, because there'd be the coach is there to help a player get better, and you can have a discussion about things, but ultimately, the coach is watching the player. The player can't see themselves. Yes, they can look at video, but video is not the same as the feeling that you can't grasp what the player is actually feeling on court, which you can only see live and feel live, and therefore, the player has to trust that what you're feeling is correct, and if it is, they will be feeling it as well, so they know. And so if you're wanting them to do something and they argue it, they can argue their case, but ultimately they have to defer to your knowledge and also to the reality that they can't see themselves in a match. However, if it is continual disagreement, then I'd say, the player and coach have to sit down and know what the vision is and agree the vision. Because if they don't agree the vision of how the player is going to play, then you're going to have this constant battle and it's not going to work. And I think, as you also mature as a coach, you realize that, as long as the player is trying to implement that, if you do that in practice consistently, eventually it's going to show in matches. And I think a big part of being a good coach is having the patience to allow that process to happen, because, the things get very subtle at a high level. So therefore they're not, there's a lot of pressure that, things happen very fast on court, and it's not that easy just to implement something like that. Even if you can do it well, you've got to practice it a lot and get incredibly comfortable, and then get it comfortable implementing it in a match. So the higher you get, the slower the process of what happens in practice being delivered in matches. And I think, sometimes less experienced coaches get in a rush. They want to see this, they've practiced it well and everything, so it needs to be there in the match. And under pressure is a totally different situation. So I think the dynamic is very, very interesting. And I think as a coach, you have to set your stall out. And if you've agreed the vision, you've got to hold the player accountable to that vision. And I think that's where the strength of character comes in. But also I think the maturity of the player comes in as well. I think the first stint where I had with Liam, where he was not nearly as advanced as he is now, he got to a point where he was struggling with the vision, because it took a lot of bravery to move in that direction. And I think he walked away from that for a period, but ultimately realized that it probably is the right way, and came back, which takes a lot of bravery right there and then to come back.
Tell me about the feeling of being a coach. You're in the box. You've maybe been building up to a tournament such as Australia in terms of qualifying, and then hopefully for you guys, you make it to the first round. Once you're there, like at Wimbledon, obviously this year getting to the third round, the anxiety that even fans can have is, it's palpable, and it's difficult to control. Now, I can only imagine what it must be like for you as a coach when we're going to Hawkeye and we're seeing if this ball has gone in or out, potentially to break serve, to win a set, and who knows, even to win a match. How are your nerves? How are you coping?
I think in general, very well. You're used to it. It's, what's going to happen is going to happen. Once they're out there playing, you don't have much control at all. You can give them a few pointers now. You can coach at ATP level. but you also got to be very careful with how much you give a player, because it's stressful out there, and again, clarity is really important. So if you're giving any message, it's got to be very crisp and clear, and not confusing in any way. And sometimes that's one of the most difficult things, is to work out exactly what to say that's very punchy and quick, that's going to make a difference and be taken in by the player in the right way. And a lot of it comes from discussion, before a match, because if you say to a player, more forehands line, the player has to know, and you've had this discussion beforehand, that doesn't mean start trying to force shots line, but be aware that when the opportunity is there, take it more often. And so, but if something arises in the match that you haven't discussed, as an example, and again, it's the player having the awareness that more tee serves doesn't mean like 80% tee serves. They've got to have that intelligence to know that just tweak it a little bit, and so that's the communication is really, really important to get that right, which is probably the most difficult thing. In terms of the nerves, in certain, really big matches that tend to take a life of their own, it does get more difficult. You have to be aware that the player is going to be looking at you pretty often. And, if you're like this and they see that, they're already stressed, and it's like, oh my God, that point must have been even bigger than I thought, or whatever. So you got to try and as much as possible keep quite stoic in the box, and very encouraging, and that sometimes is also difficult to not show your emotion at all in a big moment. And the other thing is not to get elated either when things are going well, because it changes so fast. You're never safe until match point is won. It's all, it's and I think sometimes that's also very, very difficult when a player's closing in on winning a match. That's really important, that you don't allow, you're asking the player to play 1 point at a time. As the coach, you need to play 1 point at a time as well. You just cannot allow your mind to drift forward. I do believe that energy connects the player and the coach. You feel connected while they're playing. And I think if you have negative thoughts, or you're looking ahead or whatever, there's a possibility that affects the player's outlook, because they're so in tune with how you are on the side, and you're so in tune with what they're feeling. And that's what you can't get on video, of course.
What are your
I
thoughts?
hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It's a whole gamut of emotions, but I think it's particularly interesting that sometimes you have to keep those in check. We're just coming towards the end now. Just a couple more questions for you. One is about on-court coaching. What are your thoughts and feelings? We've had this. I think the trial pit has come to an end now, as far as I'm aware. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think they may as well renew it. The bottom line is it's been going on for years and years anyway. So formalizing it is actually fairer, because it means everybody has an equal crack at the whip. And also, I think it will help coaching, because if a coach is a bit of a bluffer in those key moments, they're going to have to come up with something. It's easy after a match to come up with something, but in the heat of the moment, it's not that easy. So I think it will identify for players the better coaches from those that are maybe not as ready or experienced. And I think, it's something that, as I said, been going on since whenever, since tennis has been professional. So it seems ridiculous not to actually have a way of doing it.
I want to talk now finally about the situation slightly lower down the tennis food chain. I hope you don't mind me suggesting that outside the top 100, it must be a very different situation to when you're certainly top 20. Things like costs and also relations with other players, for example. Do some acknowledge you a little bit more than others, shall we say, both in terms of the locker room, in the hallways, in the bowels of the various different stadiums that we're in, but also, in and around the tour. And then also obviously the financial aspect, and maybe you have to think about one or two things compared to other players.
Well, firstly, I think what you're getting at is, and I wrote a book about this called Locker Room Power, is that at every level, there are the kind of bigger dogs in a tournament, and they have locker room power, and it allows them to kind of win quite a lot of matches just because of, the fact that they're on a good run, or because of their ranking, or how they carry themselves. And you can learn a lot of those traits if you focus on them. But also, locker room power is, if you know about it and how it works and you understand it, you have the antidote against it and can start to develop your own locker room power and be able to understand what top players know intrinsically, and they use it against lesser players because it makes their job easier. So that's part of the difficulty of coming through is to be able to overcome those feelings of inadequacy and feeling that, not only, even if you feel your game is maybe good enough, mentally you have to feel like you belong, and that's at every level. The jump from, ITF to futures to challengers to tour, and upper tour level, which is the 1000s and Grand Slams, and that is a process. I think the spread of money in tennis is starting to improve now. I think the ATP have realized that challenges are an important part of the process, and the ITFs are still quite a way behind, though $25,000 futures are improving things, but the money is not enough. And I'm not, for 1 minute advocating that maybe it should be enough to cater for 1,000 players on the planet. I think, but I think once players start, nearing, 500 in the world, they're pretty damn good players. And certainly inside 300, these are very accomplished players that are working very hard and kind of deserve to make a living. And I think the real challenge also for players at futures level, if they don't have, big sponsors or very wealthy parents, is they might be able to make enough money to stay on the road and play and get some coaching back at some training base, but they never have a coach on the road with them. And that is incredibly, incredibly difficult to handle, because when players get down or they lose a few matches and they start to get a little foggy in their brain, it's really hard for them to straighten that out themselves on the road. I think another thing is who they hang around with, because I have a little adage that I believe is true, is that they need other players. They need other players to practice with. They need kind of the friendships on the road to keep going. But they've got to be very careful with the the choice of friends, the choice of practice partners, and that, because there are players at the lower levels who I mean, I would say are more like tourists than actual serious players, and it's easy to sort of become a victim at the sort of $10,000 or $15,000 tournament level, where you just have to, the top players are lucky, and anybody breaking through is lucky, and if I had the money I would, and if I had that I would, and at the end of the day, if you work really hard and you have the ability, and you are reasonably well disciplined, you will climb the rankings. But be very, very careful with who you surround yourself with, because they can get more lost that way, and fall in love with the idea of being a professional tennis player rather than fall in love with the work that it takes to be a professional tennis player.
Are there players that stand out for you in terms of? Listen, I don't expect you to highlight names negatively, but what I'd like to know is, maybe, are there players that stand out in a positive sense, at least, for the players ranked lower down? And you don't have to name names, but are there some players that you personally think that guy's a bit of a XYZ for just ignoring you, or just being a bit demeaning?
Look, I mean, I don't want to get into names, but
No.
I mean, I do think that players at the lower levels need to look at examples of players who have come through, and kind of look at their path and how they've done it and what they're invested in, because you can go out and buy a fancy pair of shoes and smart clothes or whatever, and spend £1,000, or you can invest in better string, or invest in a coach for a week, or something like that, which means sacrificing the nicer clothes. But if you're at the lower levels, it's going to take unfortunately a lot of sacrifice, if you don't have as I said, a sponsor or wealthy parents who are willing to back you all the way. But there are great examples. I mean, Lissy Barnett, who's come through to play Billie Jean King Cup, been at Bath, pretty much all her career, apart from going to college for 4 years. And Lissy, when she came out of college, was not anywhere near being a good professional tennis player, but she's learned it, and she's just kept at it. And Estrella Burgess, I don't know if you remember him, but I mean, he was playing futures, up until sort of 28, 29 years of age. He'd have to stop and coach for a few months to get money together to go back and play. But, his desire to do it was so high that he came through and made top 50 in the world, and won, 2 tour events. At one stage, he was the oldest guy, and might still be. But I think Gilles Muller might have been older when he won his first tour event.
Okay.
But I mean, these guys, Estrella Burgess is an amazing story of perseverance. I think Lissy Barnett, Samantha Murray. These are players that just really worked at their trade and just got better and better, and didn't get distracted too distracted, by the feeling sorry for themselves brigade, or the party brigade, or there's a few different kind of players out there trying to do it differently. But at the end of the day, you cannot avoid the work. You can't avoid the focus either. And I'd say they go hand in hand together. Without a really good work ethic and real focus on what you're trying to do. And I'd say to any player, get absolute clarity of what you think your game will look like at a high level, and work towards that vision. And if you get to that vision and it's the right vision, then you will be making money. If you work towards the wrong vision, of course, which is, sadly, there are some players, a little less now because of YouTube and all the media and everything. It's quite easy to find out, what the right things are to do. But, certainly in the past, I think people would work really hard to a very bad vision and, of course, never come through.
Have you got any thoughts on the Verdasco ADHD situation with the the therapeutic drug situation? Have you got any thoughts on use of these kind of medications? Does it annoy you? Do you think it's fair game in terms of the fact that obviously he had an exemption and players lowered down and temptations and all of these kind of things?
I mean, it's such a difficult thing because, when there's big money involved, I think there are always an element of people who will try to cheat the system. But I mean, if you definitely have an issue and really need the medication, then I think absolutely you need to have it. How performance enhancing is always debatable, but if it does enhance performance, it is really it's really difficult because if you really need the medication, but at the same time it's giving you an edge, I don't know what the answer is to that, but I do think that the history of players needs to be looked at very carefully. If somebody suddenly develops ADHD at the age of 22, I'm very skeptical. If they were diagnosed at 10 years old or whatever and been on this medication their whole lives, then I say, of course, it's right and proper. I think that's the only answer I can think of legitimate drugs for legitimate problems. Is I'm not saying if it's absolutely true that something can develop later in age, and I'd say I wouldn't take, I don't even know all the rules, but surely one doctor's view cannot be the only view. I think if somebody develops something and needs a medication suddenly, that there's got to be a panel of 3 independent doctors who examine and make sure that it's actually genuine. You can't just go to Switzerland to what is it, Invictus or something like that, and say I want to die. You have to have an independent panel and everything like that, making sure that you're not being coerced or anything like that. So I do think there are ways of making sure that any drug that a player takes is legitimate. How that looks. As I said, I've got some ideas, but I'm sure there are smarter people than me that can work out a fair system that does not allow players to abuse a drug for a small edge. And the one good thing about tennis, I'd say, is the skill levels and everything that it takes. Whilst drug enhancement obviously helps, I'm convinced that you can still beat a player that's maybe cheating.
Sure.
Just a little bit harder.
Do you, David? This is, I promise you, is the penultimate question. I've got one about your podcast, by the way, but you can keep it as brief as you want, and I also don't expect names. But have you ever heard? Do you suspect when you suddenly see a guy coming from nowhere, or someone maybe on the WTA side as well? And have you ever heard or had strong suspicions about perhaps untoward behavior in terms of enhancements?
I think occasionally I've had the odd suspicion, but my view of it is, at the end of the day, there is drug testing, there is a system in place, and if you're going to waste a lot of energy trying to, because nobody's ever going to know anything for sure until it's proven. I just see it as a waste of energy to try and, pretend that somehow you're going to find out the truth about a thing, and I think it's very, very dangerous when people start just sending rumors around that are unsubstantiated, and I don't think it does the sport any good. And I think ultimately you've got to believe that, most people are fair, but it would also be naive to say that with such big money involved that nobody would try to cheat, because that's not, in any industry in the world, there is, some corruption, and you just can't avoid that. So, tennis is no different from any other industry. If there's, an advantage to be had, there's a certain small percentage of a population that will try to take advantage of it.
Dave, final part. Tell us about your Nuggets podcast.
Yeah, this started, actually. I did the Berkeley Executive Coaches Institute course through the University of Berkeley a couple of years ago. A fantastic 10-day course. It's very, very immersive, very intense. And I was one of the older people on the course, trying to enhance my coaching abilities. And, certainly it's amazing that when you do courses like that have absolutely nothing to do with tennis, the amount of nuggets you pick up that can help your coaching. But I was, we'd have a lot of discussions over this 10-day period, and a lot of the time they'd ask me my opinion about something, and a few of the candidates on the course would say, it's time for another Dave Sammel nugget. And then one of them actually suggested, why don't you start a podcast just giving out nuggets of your wisdom? And I have to say here that, I've read a lot, I've listened to a lot, been on a lot of courses. So, what I try to do is distill lessons I've learned into small little nuggets that can help people in everyday life. This podcast is not aimed specifically at tennis players, tennis coaches. These are more life lessons that I've learned. And if it helps one person have a better day, or one person, improve their life, then I think it's worthwhile. And I didn't want to have a long podcast, so it's a no frills, literally 5 minutes or less. Occasionally I go to 6 minutes on a topic, but yeah, it's like, can you get a quick 5 minute or less nugget every single week? And that became a challenge for me. And even now I ask the question, why am I doing it? Because it doesn't have a huge listening base. Not that I do a huge amount to promote it, but it's almost like, can I keep the discipline of doing this every week? And it does help me, clarify my own mind, little bits of information that I've picked up over years, and put it down, on paper, and then, do a podcast about it. So, you're doing very well. If you just hit 150 subscribers, congratulations.
850.
850, yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So yeah, almost 1,000. So and I know how difficult that is. I don't even know how many subscribers I've got because I'm not very good at the tech stuff. But I know it gets about 110, 120 downloads a week.
That's more than that's actually, to be honest with you, we sort of more on the YouTube thing, but on we've got our podcast as well, and we don't quite reach those dizzy heights. So, David, I think we're not even got an ATP ranking point when it comes to podcasts, and you're top 200 at least.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I mean, I just for the moment going to continue it. I do ask people to engage with me on it. Very few do, but I mean, I think if I was much more tech savvy, I would know how to, maybe people do try and engage with me and I don't see it. I don't know. But if I get an email, then I'll respond. Or if I get a tweet or an Instagram message or whatever, though sometimes I can go a week without looking at that as well. So I apologize. David, but I will get back to everybody if they do contact me.
This meeting, I think, has been 4 months in the making. When I say 4 months, I sent you a message 4 months ago, and you responded yesterday, and then we fixed it up for today. So it's great. But you said, "So I haven't checked my messages recently."
Well, yeah, on Twitter, I didn't realize that there's another if you don't follow someone. I went through and there were a bunch of junk messages.
I mean, I would have gone into your junk. Right? Yeah.
And I found yours. And I thought, oh, wow, this. And then I went and looked at your page and everything like that, and went, okay, this is genuine.
Yeah.
And which is why I responded. But I didn't even know that part existed. So I was sitting on a train actually, and thought I'll just go and check my accounts, and found that message. So I apologize for taking so long. Really and truthfully, email and WhatsApp are my two preferred avenues because I do check those every day.
Got it. So if Liam needs you urgently, he doesn't go use anything else.
It's always
WhatsApp. Just WhatsApp.
Yeah.
All right, David, listen, I want to say a big thank you. It's been almost an hour, despite the fact we said half an hour. We were in your junk list. Maybe one day we'll get promoted to your actual list, David.
I've what if favoritized you or whatever.
Oh, okay. We've been favoritized.
Well, so, yeah, I didn't know that it was there, so I apologize.
Make sure you check out David on Twitter at Dave Sammel. I know he's on Instagram as well, where he posts or links his podcast on a weekly basis, pretty much. So check that out as well for his little nuggets of information. And listen, I just want to say a big thank you, and also good luck for Australia.
Thanks very much, and thanks for some good questions. I hope I didn't go off into too many tangents.
You're great. I'm more conscious of using up your time. So a big thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.